you might see them for a few weeks in a row and they were carried in 4 weeks ago and now they've walked in. And they're still in pain, but they're getting better. And then another 4 weeks later, they're back playing with their kids and doing sort of exercise. The chiro is assessing the skeletal structures, working on the spine and the pelvis and other parts of the bones. I wanted to just do something physical with my body, and straight away you could see the chiro, it was very physical. The actual practical working on something, because we're using our hands and using the body, that's not going to change much, in my opinion, for a long time. Even before you sign up to university, just and sit down and have a coffee and chat with the local chiropractor. Experience in the real world is vitally important for people.
Hey there, just a quick shout out to all the listeners of Inside the Real Job. Firstly, a huge thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, hit the follow button to help us reach more ears and bring in amazing guests to share their journeys. And if any of you or someone you know is eager to talk about their profession or promote their industry, shoot me an email. You can find my contact details in the episode description. All right, let's get on with it. Enjoy this episode. Dan, what's your definition of a chiropractor, also known as a chiro?
So a chiro is a health practitioner who assesses people for musculoskeletal conditions, and then once they've assessed that issue, they use predominantly their hands to treat that area and work on that area to sort of help the person to get over that issue.
Yeah, right. And is there a big difference between what you do with a physiotherapist?
There's a lot of crossover and layover. So the simple sort of answer we give most people is that a chiro is assessing the skeletal structures, working on the spine and the pelvis and other parts of the bones. And then where a physio generally is looking more at the muscular area, so looking to rehab, strengthen areas, treat soft tissue areas. And that's the sort of main difference, but there is a lot of crossover.
Okay, great. Is there different paths to become a chiro?
Well, you've got to do a university degree, but there's sort of two paths into that. So the main path here in New South Wales is done at Macquarie University, and it's a 3-year Bachelor of Chiropractic Science, and then you've got to do a 2 years Masters of Chiropractic. So you have to do both to then be qualified to then become a chiropractor. Then you become a Doctor of Chiropractic after those 2 degrees. So 5 years total. The other pathway is if you do a different undergraduate bachelor degree, like exercise science or health science, and then you can transfer across into a grad diploma of chiropractic, which adds a year to the masters. So then becomes a 3-year masters. So you do generally your 3-year exercise science, for example, and then do the 3-year grad diploma to still be a Doctor of Chiropractic after that 6 years.
So it just takes you that extra year?
Yeah. So you don't have to do the 3 years of science because you've sort of done that in a different subject. So they combine that 3 years into one to build you up into the predominantly the chiropractic subjects that you would have missed.
Yeah, so it's good if someone was doing some sort of science degree and then later on found, actually I might want to become a chiro, they can just do that switch.
And can sort of be any undergraduate degree. If you haven't done sciences, you may need to do some bridging courses, because there is a lot of physics and chemistry in the sort of anatomy parts. You wouldn't think so when you get into it, but multiple ways to get in.
And can you maybe break that down for us? Like what's the first couple of years versus the masters? I assume the masters is more practical.
So the 3-year chiropractic science is sort of giving you the fundamental knowledge to then use in a practical world. Day to day, as a chiropractor, you've got to work on different muscles and joints. So you need to sort of know how those muscles and joints work. A muscle is broken down into little molecules, so you need to know what those molecules are, and then the blood comes into that. So the first 3 years is a lot of chemistry, a lot of physics, a lot of anatomy, physiology, learning sort of the basic principles. And then every year it's like adding a layer on. So by the time you're getting to the 3rd year, the end of the bachelor, you're getting a lot more practical work in to then go into the masters, which is putting it all together. So you're still doing anatomy, you're still doing chiropractic, you're still doing research and other subjects, but it's putting all those subjects from the first 3 years together into a more practical component.
Right. And where do you do your practical? Do you do it at clinics? Do you do it at hospital or both?
From day one, you're working on each other as students, learning that fundamental skills of how to touch a body, how to assess a body on the other students. And then when you get into 4th year and 5th year, the university owns 3 different student clinics, and then you work out of those clinics in the 5th year to get your practical hours. So you either do so many hours and see so many people in that final year to then meet the criteria to then qualify to be a practitioner.
Do you know how many hours you do?
Well, it's 300 patients you have to see in that final year.
Right.
And as part of that, you've got to do other assessments on those patients over there. So you're doing different assessments along the way to prove that you're safe, for one, to be let loose on the public, and you've got the knowledge to be able to help people. So they're doing little assessments along the way as part of those 300 patients.
And can you help us visualize what that practical looks like? What do you do with your first patient? Is it just real basic chiro stuff, if there's such thing as basic?
Yeah, the first thing as someone walks in, you've got to assess what brings them in, because people would go to a chiropractor for all sorts of reasons. And so even in the student clinic, they would come in and they might have neck pain, headache, knee pain, ankle pain. So the first things are assessing why they're there and what's there. And you've also got to assess whether you can actually help them, because there are some pains that are in the body that aren't from musculoskeletal conditions. If someone's having a heart attack, they can have shoulder pain or arm pain. So the first step is to assess if it's an actual issue that you as a chiropractor can work on. So it's sort of going through those checklists to see if it's actually coming from something you can help them with.
And what about assessments? Is it just you get assessed throughout the year, or do you have like a one final exam to make sure that, as you said earlier, to get the tick to go out in the public?
Well, sort of all the above. So throughout that final year, you're in the student clinic, there's a supervisor. He or she will be observing you, working on the patients. And the patients in the student clinic are general public. So they're coming into these clinics off the street. Sometimes they're family and friends, but a lot of times it's just people who are in the area. And so you're doing different assessments to assess the different regions. So you do a test on how you would assess their cardiovascular health, their respiration health, do assessments on their nerves and if they've got any neural issues. And then basic sort of chiropractic ones, testing their muscles, testing their joints, testing their range of motion, those sort of physical tests. And then you tick those off throughout the year to see whether you're competent and safe. And then once you've seen the 300 patients and once you've finished all the theory sides, all the different exams and work you have to do for that year, there is one final test where you sit in a room with two different supervisors and they give you a case, and then you go through that case with them, and along the way it might be through curveballs that they throw at you to make sure that you pick up any of those health safe issues and how you would treat them, and they tick you off whether you're safe to finish your degree and then be out in the general public. Once you've passed, all your grading gets sent off to APRA, the authority in Australia who registers all sorts of practitioners, so dentists, doctors, physios, they all get registered by APRA. And then once that comes through, you get a provider number, and then you can start working in the clinic.
Nice. And talk about working. So what's a day in the life of a chiro?
Well, that's one of the things I love about chiropractic. No 2 days are the same. Especially I work in a clinic that sees all sorts of people. So we'll see babies to small kids to everyday mums and dads. There's professional athletes who come in, and then there's 96-year-olds who come in who are sort of just trying to get moving and look after themselves later in life. So you don't know what's going to sort of walk in the door. Could be someone who's being literally carried in, crying in pain. They've sort of got a disc issue putting pressure on the nerve and they're in excruciating pain. And then you could have someone who's just come in for a little check over to make sure they're okay before they jet off on a holiday. So it sort of varies from day to day, and that's sort of part of it that I love.
And I guess each patient is what you said earlier when you were a student, is just assessing if you could help first, and then if you can, what are the steps to do that? Is that what a time with a patient will look like?
Yeah, definitely. So as the patient comes in, you're first off starting with questions. You're asking why they're there, what brings them in, what pain are they having, what sort of symptoms are they having? And straight away in the back of your head, you're trying to think, is this something that you can help them with? So as you get more experience, the more you work, this process becomes faster in your head, and you sort of have a little checklist in your head that you learn at uni to sort of tick off and go through, and you need to work out whether you need to do some of those assessments that you learn at uni, some of those tests we did through uni, whether to see if it is something more serious, a more disease or disorder that needs to be referred on to a doctor or sent off to a hospital in a serious situation, or whether it's something that you can help them with there today. Then you're assessing what's causing that problem. So you would go through a range of different tests to work out why that problem's there. You would test the different muscles, you would feel the joints, and predominantly this is done in a chiropractic clinic using your hands. So you're feeling the area, you're touching the area, you're assessing the area to work on. Some clinics do use different tools and things, but predominantly where I work, it's mainly just our hands assessing this, and then you're working out why that's there, what's causing that problem. You're then discussing with the person that's there what's happening, and you're explaining to them what's part of it, and that's a huge part of the job, is to work on telling the person and explaining why it's there. And then you would go into how you're going to treat it with them, and then you would start working on it. And depending on the area, that might be sort of working on releasing the muscles, adjusting the joints. Then it would be giving them any rehab work, any exercises to do at home, things to prevent this coming back. You might be talking about their posture at their desk or how they're doing things from day to day which led to this problem, and then sort of what to do over the next few days to help alleviate it, whether they need to put heat on it, ice on it, sort of that at-home care so they can manage it themselves. You're doing a lot of work yourself, but then you're putting also a lot back on them for the person to help themselves so they can have the tools to prevent it coming back in the future and to work on the problem going forward.
Good to know. And do you have to do anything afterwards? I assume there's a lot of like note taking and...
Yes, so the note taking is a vital part of it. It's the least favourite part of the work.
Okay, yeah, admin?
Admin part. But yeah, it's vitally important because a lot of times you'll be seeing this person again for a follow-up session because most issues that we see are because it's repetitive strain. So you need to sort of write down what you've done, what advice you've given, so you can sort of next time you see him, you know where to continue on from. We see a lot of people in a day, so if you didn't write anything down, you'd sort of forget next time they'd come in. They also need to write down the patient has consented to the treatment for that medical legal part and that they know what's going on, because we do get a lot of people that are in very serious situations. So sometimes people do need to go off and see doctors or surgeons or other allied health professionals, and so you need to have that paper trail to then pass on information to the next sort of person to see there. So it's part of that working as a team with other providers to get the best outcome for the person. Paperwork is the least favourite part of the job, but it's a very important part of it.
It has a bit of a ripple effect, right? It covers yourself, but as you said, if you're referring them on, the other specialist or doctor needs to see what you've done prior.
Exactly. And also, if an issue comes back in the future, you can follow back up with the history and you can see what sort of led to that problem. And then you can educate the person. Last time we saw you, it's because you did this at home. This time we've done it again. So we're having a trend of what's going on. So we need to change this, what you're doing at home, so it doesn't keep having that trend.
And do you find yourself you doing that straight after each patient, or you're doing it at the end of the day? Depends how busy you are, I guess.
Yeah, it depends how busy you are and depends what's happened that day. You try to write it down as quick as possible because that sort of doesn't test your memory.
Yeah.
But a lot of time you'll jot down some notes on what's going on and then have to do the more detailed paperwork later on. So I have a sheet of the day and I jot down the most important part and then I'll fill that out with all the extra details later on.
Yeah, gotcha. And do you have to keep up with any accreditation or do new courses throughout each year?
Yeah, so part of APRA, chiropractors have to do 20 hours a year of continued education. So those 20 hours can be made up of multiple different ways. So there's different bodies that offer seminars and courses. So it might be a weekend course or a one-day course or a few-day sort of course. And you can get a lot of that 20 hours if you do sort of that whole weekend. And a lot of those courses are a good way to network with other practitioners. You sort of do the course for the day and then you're having a drink at the hotel and discussing the latest new parts of the profession and new technology and new sort of ways things are being done. So you're upskilling yourself with these courses. They also do a lot of online modules these days that you can do as well. And since COVID, there's a lot more Zoom-like courses and webinars that you can sort of do from your own clinic or home. So there's many ways to get those 20 hours, but yes, you need to do 20 hours a year. You need to have up-to-date first aid and CPR every year as well. So that's part of the continued education.
Yeah, that makes sense. Earlier you said that no day is the same, which is great and it's rewarding. What other aspects do you love about your job? Seeing
people get better is a huge part. Seeing those people that do get carried in a lot of pain and then you work on them and you tell them why. And that telling them why a lot of times when someone's in a really bad place, just understanding why they're like that, you can see a little glimmer of light in their eyes that there's hope for them to get better. Some people come in and they've been in pain for months and even years and they've gone to different doctors and other providers and they haven't got fully better or it sort of comes and goes, and just having that light in that eyes to see, this person understands my body, this person can see what's going to happen. That sort of is a good part to sort of see that there's hope at the end of the tunnel. And then working on the body and getting that person better, and then you might see them for a few weeks in a row and they were carried in 4 weeks ago and now they've walked in. And they're still in pain, but they're getting better. And then another 4 weeks later, they're back playing with their kids and doing sort of exercise, and they're sort of getting their lives back together.
Yeah, so it's amazing. It's life-changing.
It's a lot of people come in and thank you for helping them. So you're sort of seeing people at their worst but then you're sort of seeing the fruits of that labour down the track.
Yeah, nice. And what about the other part? Any major challenges apart from, obviously, as you mentioned earlier, you may not be able to help them completely, so you refer them on. But what other challenges that you might face?
A lot of time when people are in pain, they're not in a very good attitude. They're in pain, they haven't slept, they're not doing the things they like to do, so they're not in the best mood. And so a lot of times people sort of come in and it's the worst day of their life. They're really angry and upset. And so they can take that out on you sometimes and take it out on the other staff in the clinic. So that can be really hard to deal with at certain times. And so it's learning what to do in those situations and having a good communication with them and explaining why and sort of de-escalating those situations. Because if you've ever been in pain yourself, you're not going to have a joke and laugh. Those are stressful times. And again, experience and going through those times, you sort of learn something from every time you've gone from that. And so the next time it's a bit easier to deal with.
Good to know. Thank you. Obviously, it's quite rewarding helping someone that's in a serious situation to getting back on their feet and doing day-to-day life stuff without any pain. Do you have one that sort of pops in your mind that you might always refer back to and keeps you motivated as well?
The good thing is it's happened multiple times. One that I do think of is a lady came in one day and she was in tears. She was sitting in my waiting room crying. I'd never met this lady before, and so I knew this is going to be an interesting case. I asked her what's going on and she just burst into tears. She was at her lowest low. She'd been living with pain for years. She'd tried everything. She'd been to doctors, she'd been to surgeons. So she had this debilitating neck pain and no one could help her. She was living on pain meds and she openly said from right at the start that she was suicidal because she was just couldn't live in that pain. So it's a lot to take on when you hear that, but you've got to sort of put that aside and work out, is there anything you can do to help her? And so de-escalating that situation was a massive part of calming yourself down to not get too emotionally involved in that. Because when someone tells you they're suicidal, obviously you're going to take that on. Assessed her, found that she had a lot of issues in her whole body. It wasn't just one problem, it was lots of things. And so then explaining that to her, you could see that glimmer in her eyes that, wow, this person understands my whole body. And so we said, let's just start off slow, let's get the ball rolling, let's work on a few areas and see whether we can help you. I don't know that I can help you, but let's see if we can. So then saw her again the next week and she said, it's the best I've ever slept for years.
Wow.
And so then we worked on a bit more. She was still in pain, she was still on pain meds, she was still in a bad way, but it was just that little bit by little bit by little bit. And over a few weeks, she started to sort of get better. She started to come off the pain meds. She still had lots of issues and problems, and she probably will for the rest of her life.
Sure.
But she's starting to get that life back and not sort of having those suicidal thoughts anymore. So compared to a normal person, she's still got lots of problems and issues, but compared to where she was that day, she's a lot better and a happier person.
Yeah.
So thinking of those really serious situations, because that could have gone easily the other way. If she didn't walk into my clinic that day, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Those little moments are good to think about, and they're also good moments to not talk in exact details with other people who are in a bad way, but just sort of give the overall general message of that story to other people who are in a bad way. Because if you've ever been in a lot of pain, you sort of think it can't get any worse than this. But then telling someone who might have a shoulder pain this lady's story, that person sort of immediately feels, oh, this is not as bad. I'm going to get better as well. So it can sort of help you with other patients who are in a serious situation as well. So
that's a good one. Thank you. One particular thing that's always in my mind is, I know a lot of people don't go and see chiros because they don't like the sound of cracking. Do you have patients that come in and go, look, I know I should be here, but I don't really want you to crack my bone? How do you overcome that?
And it does happen, especially with TikTok and Instagram and all the videos that are out there. You're seeing people put out videos of cracking everything, and there are quite some funny videos out there that sort of take it to the next level.
It is.
And so the work is not all what's on TikTok. There's a lot more to do with it. So you don't have to crack the bone. So the cracking is when you're sort of adjusting the bone, you're moving the joints, and the fluid in there actually makes a little air bubble. And so it's the air bubble that's making that pop. So it's not the bone sort of making that noise. And so just explaining that to someone, what's actually happening, the physiology element, as I said, in the science, you're learning what's actually happening at the micro level. And so explaining that to someone, that immediately can calm them down. They have more confidence that you can work on them. But you can still work on people and not crack the bone. There's a lot of ways to help someone's body without doing that. So you again can talk to the patient what the other options are. You can massage it and stretch it and move the body without sort of causing that crack. And so that's part of the experience of dealing with that situation. But it does happen a lot. But what you generally find is you start off easing into it, working on the soft tissue, stretching it, and they build confidence with you and they realize that you're not one of the TikTok videos, and they sort of, after a while, they say, okay, well today, how about we do a little one? And they go, oh, that wasn't that bad. And you sort of build the confidence from there. So a lot of times, people that start like that eventually let you do whatever you need to do to help them, because they've sort of built that rapport with you over a few sessions.
Interesting. And when you're at uni, do you know if any students or yourself had issues?
Well, because it's a 5-year degree, they slowly introduce it over that time. From first year, you are working on the other students. So you're not adjusting anyone in first year, you're touching and moving joints. So you literally start on working on the ankle and the foot. So you're holding the foot, you're moving the foot, you're twisting the foot, and so you're working out how that moves around. Then you sort of move to the wrist, and then you can build up there, and you sort of work your way up to the lower spine, to the pelvis, to the mid back, to the upper back. And the very last thing you do is the neck, because the neck is the sort of thing that most people are scared about, and it is also the most dangerous part. And you've got to be the most cautious with the neck. And so when I went through, you didn't get to the neck till third year. They've since changed the course. I'm not sure if it's still third year now, but we didn't touch the neck until 3 years in. So we've had 2 full years of working on bodies and building that experience.
Okay, great. Are there different type of chiros? I assume there's a lot of specialized type of chiros.
Yeah, I work at a clinic that sees everyone and anyone, but there are more specific clinics out there. So the basic sort of specialization is whether they'll see a certain population or whether they'll see a certain issue. So there's pediatric chiropractors who predominantly only see babies and small children and maybe pregnant ladies during that. Then you may have a more rehabilitatory chiropractor where they're sort of working on just rehabilitating injuries and issues. And then you'd have chiros who are working on special conditions. So there's chiros out there who are focused on brain injuries and other neurology diseases and problems. Oh. So they're working specifically on those conditions. So they wouldn't see someone with just general low back pain. They're sort of looking at that more higher end neurology components. There's other places that specialise in vertigo, other places that specialise in migraine. There's then sport-specific chiropractors where it's much more blend with physiotherapy, sort of working on sport-specific injuries. So predominantly most clinics are general, but there are other specific clinics like those and other types as well.
And do you just specialise through your experience? Do you go like, I'm just going to do everything in general, and then 5 years down the track, actually I'm going to specialise in sports, for example, or can you specialise straight out of university?
So at uni, because you've got the 5 years, they do go through the different topics. So you do some sport rehab, you do some pediatric, you do some neurology components. It's very small in the scheme of things, but you do get a taste of it. So while you're at uni for those 5 years, you may go, wow, I really like this pediatric part. And this is a generalization, but a lot of females who are going to be mothers themselves sort of tend to head that way. Obviously, males can do it as well. Mm-hmm. I treat pregnant people and babies all the time. So once you then finish the course, you can then do other courses, those weekend courses and other seminars to get that extra knowledge. And you can do those while you're at university as well. So you can sort of be upskilling yourself in those specific areas while you're doing the course. So then as soon as you finish uni, you can go straight into that if you wish. But generally, I'd say people would finish work in a general practice and then specialise from there as a general rule of thumb.
Yeah, great. Salary-wise, just insights from a range perspective, someone starting off, what does that look like?
So there's 2 general ways chiropractors get paid. So the first is they get a percentage of what they see. Patient comes into the clinic, the patient would pay, for example, $100, then you would get a percentage of that, and that would vary depending on what it is, but let's just say it's 50% of that. So you would get paid to how many people you saw for that week. So that's the first sort of way you get paid. The second way is a salary. So then you would get paid no matter how many people you saw. So that way obviously has the benefit of guaranteed money, but then also you're capped on how much money you can make if you see a lot more people. So there's sort of the 2 ways of income in the chiropractic world. And it definitely is heading more towards the salary current world. A percentage base was sort of how it was done in the past. Actually, I had to look this up. The average salary for a chiropractor is between $80,000 to $150,000. And that was sort of first year out to more experience. But obviously that can vary depending on where you are and what you're sort of on. But 80 to 150 is the sort of average there from.
That's good. Good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Don't know about you, but what really stood out with my conversation with Dan was the story that he shared about helping the lady who was struggling mentally and physically. Dan helped her get back on her feet to an extent. Dan said she will still have pain for the rest of her life, but it's all manageable, making her life a lot more comfortable and balanced. And to me, that just highlighted how important and how rewarding being a chiropractor is. So for those that are interested and really want to make a difference in people's lives for mental and physical health, a chiropractor definitely covers that aspect. If you like that episode, please stay tuned as I continue my conversation with Dan, where he shares how he became a chiro, why he became a chiro, the future of his industry, and his tips on landing a successful role or career in chiro. And remember, make today a good news day.